Hello friends, this is Nitin Kulkarni. Now it's time for us to put some finishing touches on our DevOps project. Today we'll deploy our Selenium Grid infrastructure and write some basic test cases to test our code. I'm not a tester, so I'm going to help just build the infrastructure and then leave it to you all to write the detailed test cases. So let's get started. So here again, we're going to take a step-by-step approach of deploying our Selenium grid and writing our test cases. Generally, in any environment, we have various types of test cases, unit test cases, integration test cases, user acceptance test cases. We have regression test cases, and obviously the logic and the classes that we write for those test cases are different. So TestNG framework will let you kind of compartmentalize those test cases into various buckets. So we are going to in our demonstration we are going to write a demo integration test class, and that's what we will deploy. It's going to be a very simple class. All it will do is it will invoke our web page and test some very basic functionality. But I think it will be enough for you to get an idea of how to write and compartmentalize our test cases so that when the time comes, we are able to execute the right test cases for the right environment. All right, so let's start doing that. So we are back in Eclipse, and the first step is to write our test suite or integration test suite. Okay, so integration test suite will be in the form of an XML file, and I will talk more about it in just a minute. So let's do that first. So let's call it integration test ng.xml. Obviously, you can name whatever you want. Finish. So you see the XML file here. Open that. And this is the code. To save time, I have pre-written the format or the structure just so that we save time. And we have slash suite. Okay. So here, let me get rid of all this nonsense and let's create our class first. Okay, so let's go to our src test Java folder, and in this folder, click a new class. Let's call it integration test. Okay, integration test. This is just a dummy class for now. However, I have to take the package from here, go back here, and then replace it here and call it integration test. Okay, so this is our integration test suite. So let's see what it does. So what it does is TestNG framework basically will read this XML file and it will go through our tests. We can obviously have the flexibility to run only a specific set of test cases. So we can provide the name of our test to run, and whatever classes form those test cases will be run as a part of our test suite. So in our case, what's going to happen is this test will be run. It's named or it's called tests, and within that, our COM integral tests integration test class will be run, and whatever test cases are present in that class will be executed against our application. So it's going to be a very simple class, and obviously the more complicated your test cases are, the more number of classes there will be, the more number of probably even this you may have different types of tests and so on and so forth. So that's what will happen. But we'll write this code right now is a dummy code. We'll replace it with the real code after we deploy our Selenium grid. All right. So that is how we set up our test suite. So similarly here we can have regression test case XML. We can have UAT test case XML. Whatever number of test cases or whatever types of test cases that you run, we can have all those types of integration, all those types of XML files created over here. Okay, so now let's take the next step. The next step is to configure our integration testng.xml file as the seed file or the starter file for our test cases. Okay, so how to do that? So let's go to pom.xml, and in pom.xml we have this Maven plugin, right? Org Apache Maven plugin. It's a Surefire plugin, and Surefire plugin is responsible for running your test cases. So now we need to provide the name of our XML file to this plugin so that it knows that when it's time to run the test cases, it should read this XML file, and from that XML file, whatever number of classes are present in that XML file will be executed as a part of that test. Okay, so there are couple of ways of doing this. So let's try to do that. So this is the code that I just wrote. So I'm telling my Surefire plugin to use the XML file that will be present over here. Right now it's blank, but we'll put our name over there in a moment, right? And you can have multiple Suite XML files run as a part of one execution. So here is where you will provide your integration test ng XML file. But I'm sure you must be wondering, if I hardcode the name of my file here right now and call it integration test.ng.xml, and when the code progresses from integration testing to our say regression testing or UAT testing, and if I have written a different XML file for that, how will I substitute my file by the XML file that I need for that type of test cases? I cannot edit my pom.xml at runtime when the code is actually running in Jenkins, right? So we can't do that. So there is a way to solve this problem, and that way is to parameterize this particular field. So to parameterize that, you have to do dollar and then curly braces and then type surefire dot suite XML files. Yeah, that's it. So now, what it does is, this is a placeholder, and as you can figure out, this is a placeholder, and at runtime, we will provide the name of our integration. Sorry, I keep on saying integration. I mean the test suite XML at runtime. So depending upon the environment, sometimes we'll provide integration test XML, sometimes we'll provide your regression test ng.xml, sometimes we'll provide UAT test ng.xml or whatnot, right? So that is how you will do it. So with that, our Eclipse setup is almost done. Now it is time to start setting up our Selenium Grid. We are going to use the Docker image for Selenium to set up our Selenium Grid. So to find the appropriate image, you type Docker Hub Selenium and then click on the very first link on the Docker Hub, and you should see a lot of Selenium images that you can use for building the Selenium Grid. So what you're going to do is, a Selenium Grid is basically made up of a host and nodes, right? So it's like a controlling node or a controlling part of the grid that controls the various test nodes. So the controlling node, for the lack of better word, I'm just calling it controlling node, is Selenium slash hub. So let's click on that, and then within that, if you go to the corresponding GitHub link that they provide, there is tons of documentation that is given here on how to build the grid. So one way to build the grid is to individually run these commands that will set up your grid one step at a time, where you create the network. I mean, they have given commands here. You create a network first, and then you name the create the grid, and then you add nodes to the grid. So in this case, we're adding the Chrome and the Firefox browsers to our Selenium grid that we created one line above, right? That's one way. The other way is through Docker Compose. The advantage of doing it through Docker Compose is it is much easier to understand and it's much easier to manage. And we can add nodes at runtime with minimal effort. You don't have to really go and create these, run these commands one at a time to add nodes. We can execute or add more nodes even if you start, say, with one Chrome node and one Firefox node, and in the future, let's say you want to add 10 Chrome nodes, you can just run it through a command. You don't have to change a line in your actual compose file, Docker compose file. So that's the approach that we will be taking for our project. We'll be using the Docker compose file to build the node, and the Docker compose code is given here. So that's exactly what we're going to use. So we are literally going to copy paste whatever is given here and create our Docker compose file. Let's do that. This is just a pictorial representation of a Selenium grid. So you have the hub here, and you have one Chrome node and one Firefox node. So this is the network. So like I said, through Docker Compose, you can add X number of Chrome nodes, X number of Firefox nodes, or any browser that you want. Right. So let us build our Docker Compose file. Let's go back to Eclipse, and again we are going to add another XML file. So click File, and let's call it Selenium Grid Docker Compose. Okay, click Finish, and here all you have to do is go back to your browser and copy the code exactly how it is here. There's nothing to be changed, so just copy, go back to Eclipse and paste it. Okay, so this is how your Docker Compose file will look. So let's examine this Docker Compose file a little bit, right? So what it is saying is that I want to start 3 services for this particular grid. The first is to build my hub. So the image that I want you to use is this image, which is present in the Docker Hub, and we just looked at the Docker Hub link to see that. The container name is Selenium Hub, and the ports generally 4444, 4444 is the port that is used for Selenium Grid. So what this does is it starts or builds your hub. And now it is time to add nodes. So this is what it does. So I'm going to add, I want to add a Chrome node, and I want you to use this particular image, which is a Chrome image. And then these are the volumes. And this is an optional parameter, but this will create a volume, a Docker volume for this particular container on /dev/shm. Okay, and depends upon Selenium Hub, meaning you should not be creating this service unless the Selenium Hub, which is this, is successfully created. So it depends on that. And the environment, what it does is it tells to connect this particular node to this particular hub, which is given over here, Selenium Hub, and the port is 4444. So automatically this node, when it gets created, will link to this particular hub, and the same thing, similar code is also there for Firefox. The only difference is that the image is different. So it's very simple. You don't have to specify the number of nodes. You don't have to specify anything else. All you have to do is what image, which node to connect to, and what port number to connect to. So this is how we will be building our Docker Compose grid, or using Docker Compose to build our Selenium grid. Okay, so before we do anything else, before we write any more code, we have to create a linkage between our Ansible node and the node that we have designated for Selenium Grid. So our node for Selenium Grid is this, and we have to create a link between our Ansible server and our test node, Selenium Grid node. So we have to establish relationship between this and this node, just as we did for Ansible controller node and the Ansible managed test server. So exact same process, but we have to do it. So let's go do that first. Let's go to MovaXterm, launch another session, The host is IP addresses of the Selenium Grid server is this. The default is this CentOS. Advanced SSH is private key, which is what we have already created long time back. And let's call it the Selenium Grid. Okay, click OK, and this should launch our Selenium Grid VM. Similarly, we are also going to need our Ansible controller node, so let's launch that too. I'm sure by now you are familiar with everything that I'm going to do. So first you do is sudo su, create a user add ans admin, um, add a password. Okay, so it is done. Now let's add this user to as a sudo user. This is our standard procedure now. So save this file and then also update the our SSHD config file. So do a vi slash etc slash ssh slash sshd config and then password authentication set it to yes. Okay, save this file. Now go back to our controller node and establish the connection between these servers. So we already have the key. We have already generated the key when we set up our test server. So we'll just copy that key to our new server that we just are trying to set up. Okay, and the IP address is obtained from the dashboard. Copy the internal IP address, go back to MobiXterm, sorry, not Eclipse, go back to MobiXterm, paste it over here. So I'm sure you are aware what we are doing here, so I'm just rushing through this. Okay, so there is some problem. Okay, oh, sorry, I should have done a sudo su. Sorry, not sudo su, I should have done su ans admin. Okay, and now I'm going to copy the same command. Okay, so yes, permission, I'm getting a permission denied. Let's see what is wrong. Okay, we forgot an important step. We changed this, but we did not execute the change. So that's why it is a problem. So let's do that. Systemctl restart sshd. Okay, now it should work. Yep. Okay, one key added, and now if you do an SSH to this particular machine, you should be able to log in. So I'm able to log in. So SSH connection is established, and these two machines should now be able to talk. Okay, so with that, our setup for these two machines is done. Now the next step is to add the IP address of our Selenium grid to the hosts file on the Ansible controller node. So let's do that. So sudo vi etc slash host. Let's come down over here. Let's copy this piece, come down, paste it over here, and let's call it our Selenium, and let's take the IP address from our AWS dashboard, which is this. Take this from here, copy, go back to MobiXterm, and delete this IP address and paste our new one. Okay, so that's it. Now let's run our ping command to make sure that everything is okay. Okay, so we got two successes. One was for the test server that was set up in the previous video, and then this is our Selenium Grid. So the communication is now established, and now we are ready to move to the next step of writing our next piece of code. A couple of minutes ago, we wrote this Selenium Grid Docker Compose file, which is going to set up our Selenium Grid. Now, the Selenium Grid Docker Compose file need to run on the grid on the node or the VM where grid is set up, which is over here. However, as it stands right now, our Docker file is in Eclipse and soon it will be in Git. But then from Git, how do we make it available to this particular VM? So the first step would be to copy this file from the workspace of the job into the Ansible controller node VM. And then from Ansible controller node, you have to copy it to this particular machine. And then from Ansible controller node, execute that Docker Compose file. So let's take the first step. The first step would be to go to our Jenkins job and add this copy part, right? So here is our Jenkins job, and we had started copying our files here. So just like we copied our war file, our Docker file, and we wrote our various commands to build the image and everything, we are going to add another transfer set um, to copy our Docker. And let's move this transfer set alongside our other copy command just for the sake of consistency. Right? So the source file is going to be our Docker Selenium Grid Docker Compose. So let's copy the name from here. And then remote directory is the same as this directory. Okay, so what this will do is this will copy our grid compose file, grid docker compose file into the project files besides docker file and war file. So after this successfully executes, it will be available over there. I know that we have not yet committed our file to Git, and therefore nothing will happen unless we do that. So we'll do that in a minute. Let's save this for now. Now the next step is to copy, assuming that this file is on the Ansible controller node, we have to copy it to the Selenium Grid VM. And and the way we're going to do it is through our YAML file. So we're going to write yet another YAML file, and in the YAML file we are going to execute our commands to copy the file from Ansible node to the Selenium Grid host, and then execute the Docker Compose file through our Docker Compose commands. So let's do that now. So I'm in my playbooks directory, which is present over here. It is the Ansible playbooks, and just like we wrote the piped demo playbook.yaml, we are going to basically write another YAML file. Okay, so let's call this sudo vi selenium grid dot YAML. Rather, let's call it build selenium grid dot YAML. Okay, and again, for the interest of time, I'm going to copy the code that I have already written, but we'll go over those lines one line at a time. Okay, so this must be familiar to you. This is the host, which is Selenium, which we updated when we updated our hosts file, etc Ansible hosts file. That is where we created a new group called as Selenium, and that's what this refers to. Become yes is I want to execute this as root user, so I want to become a root user. Now, I want to copy a file, right? So I want to copy a file where? I want to copy a file in the home ANS admin proj files on the Selenium Grid VM. But what if that directory does not exist? So the first task is to go create that directory if it does not exist. If it exists, it will not, nothing will happen, right? So home NS admin proj files is the name of the directory. This folder structure is exactly the same as what we created on the Ansible node. Just for sake of consistency, I am copying or renaming the destination folder to be exactly the same, but you could name it the way you want. So state is directory, so it's a directory, not a file. And this is the permissions that I'm granting to this particular file. So my root user has full access, my group has read write access, and my other user will have read write access on this particular directory. Next is to copy the Docker Compose file. So Docker Compose file in this case is our Selenium Grid Docker Compose.yaml, which is this particular file. I want to copy that file from our source folder. Now, source folder is also the same, home NS admin, but this folder is present on the Ansible controller node, and the destination folder is present on the Selenium Grid VM or the Grid node. And this is the again the permissions. Okay. And the next two commands are basically to bring this Selenium grid down. So before I bring up my new Selenium grid, I want to bring the existing one down. And once I bring it down, I want to bring it up again with my Selenium Grid Docker Composite YAML file. And we talked about the true. What is the meaning of the true flag here? On the first run, there isn't going to be any grid to bring down. So unless I provide this command, it will fail. I don't want that to happen. So I'm kind of forcing it to go to the next step by evaluating the result of this particular execution to true, irrespective of what happens. And then I go and try to bring up my grid. Okay, so this is another simple YAML file that I'm going to execute through our Jenkins, right? So let's save this. Now you must be wondering, okay, you copied the Docker Compose file, you created the directory, you wrote the command to execute, bring the grid up and down. But what about installation of Docker Compose? We never did that. And that's an excellent point. We should be writing something to execute or install Docker Compose on the destination folder. And to be honest, I found that part to be the most tedious part. For whatever reason, I don't know, I can't pinpoint on the reason, but I found it to be the most tedious and time-consuming effort to write a simple Docker Compose installation command. And I couldn't find a straightforward, simple way of writing raw commands in my YAML file. So what I decided is I decided to use the Ansible roles to do that. So what I did is I went to the Ansible Galaxy, and I searched for the Docker Compose. And I tried a lot of these actually. I probably tried this guy. I also tried this guy, but for some reason or the other, I had trouble. So at the end of the day, I ended up using the uh, role provided by somebody named Girling Guy. I've used this person's roles elsewhere also. So Girling Guy is this particular person who whose role helped me install Docker Compose successfully at the end of the day. So if you click on this particular Docker link over here, it shows that Compose is a part of its installation file and it is available on our OS also, right? So that is why I ended up using that. And the way to install this is to execute the Ansible Galaxy install Docker command on our Ansible controller node. So I'm just going to copy it, go back to my mobix term, and then execute the command on my node over here. So let's go to cd slash etc slash ansible, and in this directory you will find a folder called as roles, and this is where we are going to install our girling guy docker compose role. Okay, so let's do that now. So I'm going to switch to cd roles and then paste the command from the Ansible Galaxy. So let's click install. It will take list range list index out of range. So I got some issue. Let's fix that. Okay, the problem was that I should have executed that command as a root. So I have switched back to root, and let's go back to our um, Ansible Galaxy and copy that command one more time. Okay, let's execute that command. Hopefully this will work this time. Okay, the role was installed successfully, and if you look at the folder now, you will see girlingguy.docker command over here. Now, here is when I faced a lot of problem, and it constantly, when I ran the Docker Compose file, it constantly gave me an error. But before even we talk about the error, we have to update our YAML file to include our role. Let's do that first. So cd slash etc slash ansible slash playbook, and our name of our playbook was build selenium grid.yaml. So sudo vi. Okay, let's go here, and now here is where we have to add a role. So it's roles colon, and then in the next line you type hyphen space role colon space, and the name of our role is girlingguy.docker. Okay, so run that. Save this. Okay, now as I was mentioning, this is where I ran into a lot of issues. So let's do the syntax check on our YAML file. So syntax is fine. Now let's run it. I mean, a dry run it. Let's see what happens. Okay. In the install Docker part of the task, we are seeing an error called as no package matching Docker C found available. And this is where it gave me a lot of grief in trying to figure out how to resolve this error. And after spending hours and hours researching what that issue is, I came to realize that it is looking for a repository called as docker-c. And that led me to creation of another role. Rather, I looked for this error on the internet, and I found that I need to create another role to resolve this error. So what I ended up doing was I went to the roles folder, so cd slash etc slash ansible roles, and within that I ended up creating another folder called as custom add docker repo. Permission denied. Okay, I should be running this as sudo. Okay, so I created that, and then within that I created another folder. So I navigated to this one, and then I did a sudo mkdir tasks, and I ended up creating a main.yaml file. So main.yaml. Okay. And within this main.yaml, I ended up pasting the following code. I cannot take the credit of writing this code on my own. I looked up online and I was able to find this online, and it came to my rescue. Uh, Essentially, it ends up creating a Docker C dot repo within on my machine, and that error that we previously saw goes away. So let's save this file. Okay, the file is saved, and let's try to run this. Sorry, before we even do that, I have to add this role in my YAML file, right? So I have to do sudo vi. What happened? Oh, wrong folder. So I need to go back to my cd etc ansible playbook and now run this command. And underneath this, or before this role, I have to add another role, and the name of this role is going to be docker c custom add.docker c. Okay, custom.add hyphen docker and hyphen repo, right? So this is what. Now let's save our file. Okay, so now both the roles are ready. Our grid XML build grid .yaml file is also ready. Now it's time to execute this grid file and see if everything is going to work all right or not. Right. So let's go back to our Jenkins and see how to execute our build Selenium grid.yaml and make sure that our Docker Compose file is copied and everything else should fall in place now. Okay, let's do that now. So I'm back in the build and push image jobs configuration page, and now I'm going to include a transfer set that will execute the Ansible playbook that we just finished writing to build our Selenium grid. So I'm going to click on add transfer set, and I'm going to execute the command which says change directory to playbooks and then build Selenium grid. So what this build Selenium grid will do is it will execute the Docker Compose file and create our Selenium grid as per the specifications. All right. So click apply, click save. Now we are also what we're going to do is we're going to add one more job that should run after the build and push image job that will run our integration test. So all those parameterized changes that we made in Eclipse over here, we made our POM file parameterize. All those changes will come into play now. So let's do that. Click on back to dashboard, click on new item, and let's call it integration testing. Integration testing phase. And let's make it a Maven project. Click OK. So here, this is something new that we have not done before. We in the general section, there is this parameter called as this project is parameterized. So let's click on that. Let's click on add parameter and select choice parameter. And here, let's call it test suite and provide the name of our integration test file, which is this. So copy the name and paste it over here. So what this will do is at runtime, the integration test ng.xml name will be provided to the POM file. Now, we could have also chosen a string parameter as our option over here. The choice parameter, what it does is I could have, let us say, if I had integration testing.xml and if I had, say, regression testing.xml. So let's see if I had another XML like this. Uh, in case for any reason I want to run this particular phase uh, manually, I could come to this particular job, and when I run this job, I would be asked what type of test I want to run. Whether I want to run the integration test ng or whether I want to run the regression test ng. So the choice parameter will enable the selection of the right XML file for the type of test that you want to run. However, as far as my personal preference is concerned, I would have created a separate job for regression testing, a separate job for UAT testing, and so on and so forth. So in that case, I would not need the choice parameter, and I could live with the string parameter also. But for this example, let's stick to the choice parameter, and where there is going to be just one choice of regression integration test ng.xml. Okay. So that is what the project is parameterized option will do. Then let's go to our source code management. Let's go to Git and specify the name of our Git repository. Paste it over here, and now it should pick up the POM file from our repository and execute that. Now, what we have to do is we have to navigate to the build section and specify how we want our POM file to be run. Okay, tests to be run basically. So let's go to our build section. In the POM, pom.xml is still the same. There is no change to that. Now in goals and options is where the whole difference is made. So here I'm going to say clean test, and I'm going to pass the parameter, the surefire suite XML files. Remember this. If you go to our Eclipse, we have parameterized this value where we are calling it surefire.suite XML files. So this same name is over here, surefire.suite XML files. And here I am passing the $test suite, and the $test suite is coming from here. Okay, I do understand that for since this job is just having just one XML file, there probably was no need to create the parameterized option at all. We could have just hard coded the name here, because in case the name changes, you have to change it over here anyway. So I don't think it would have made a difference if we would have hard coded the name here. But what this does is it creates gives you a flexibility of adding integration test. Let's say you have variety of integration testing that you need to do, or you want to run a subset of integration testing before putting the code in through the next phase. In that case, you could create integration test ng subset.xml, and then you could use it as a choice parameter, and run it over here. Uh, so we'll keep it, even though it is not needed, strictly not needed for our phase, we will keep it the same, right? So this is how this particular code will run. So let's click apply. Let's click save. Okay, so our integration testing phase is now ready. Now we just have to connect our previous job to this particular job. Let's um, let's do that now. So I'm back to my dashboard. Click on build and push image job. Click configure, and in the post build actions, you specify the next job that you want to run, build other projects, and specify the name of the phase that we just finished building. Okay, so click apply, click save. So now your jobs are connected. The upstream job is building the war, and the downstream job is integration testing phase. Okay, so our jobs are now connected. Our XML file is now ready, YAML file is now ready, Docker Compose file is ready, everything is ready. The only piece that is missing is now we have not yet committed any code in ID, in our ID, Eclipse ID. Let's do that, which will trigger this build from top to bottom. So before we commit our code, there is one more step that we should have taken. So let's click on the configure for build and push image job. And we need to go to our copy section where we are copying all our files and write this command that copies the Selenium Grid Docker Compose.yaml to this specific workspace. Also, we have to include the extension of the file that I noticed was not correct. So Selenium Grid Compose.yaml is what we need to uh, copy to our Ansible machine. Click apply, click save. Also, there is one more small change that we have to do to our um, build cellgrid.yaml file on the Ansible controller node. And it's a very minor change, but an important change. So let's do that. So sudo vi build, sorry, wrong folder again. So let's move to our cd etc Ansible playbooks and sudo vi build grid. And here, the only change that I'm making is I'm not forcing this specific command to be true irrespective of what happens. If the Docker compose fails while bringing up my grid, I want to know. So I'm not going to enforce it and kind of make it feel like it succeeded even though it may not have. So that's a small change. Let's do that. Come out, WQ, save. So our Selenium grid.yaml is also saved now. Now let's go and commit our code. So I'm back in my Eclipse. Click team commit and just type whatever you want here. Commit push close, and now my build process should have started here in my Jenkins. So something is running. Let's see, build and push image job has already, no, not that one. Let's go back to our dashboard, build var. It is running. Output is success. Next job is build and push, so it is pending. See what's going on here. Okay, it is showing success. It is telling me that my grid is up. It has changed this IP address and brought my grid up. Just to confirm, let's go to our Selenium Grid VM and see if it is really up. So this is my Selenium Grid VM 313180, and I'm going to see if my grid is up. Docker ps. So it is showing me that my Selenium node Firefox is up, Chrome is up, and my hub is up. So I was able to successfully bring up my Selenium grid. So far so good. We have been successfully able to bring up our grid now through Jenkins and Docker Compose. Let's now make some updates to our JSP page and write the corresponding test case just to make sure that we are able to test our code using the Selenium grid that we just set up. So as you can see here, I have updated the index.jsp from hello world to a little more elaborate than how it was. Again, this is nowhere close to what a production JSP or production code would be, but this is just to illustrate the point that it has got multiple it's called a table and multiple text fields here. And then it submits, but the submission doesn't go anywhere because there is nothing waiting on the other end to accept the request. So this is just to prove that once my website is up, I'm able to access the website, I'm able to launch my browser, and I'm able to test the appropriate or the correct launching of my JSP page. Okay, so now let's go update our integration test. So I have updated the integration test also. The integration test previously had only main method. I have deleted that, and I am basically again this code is far from perfect, so don't treat this as a as ideal test case code. Again, this is just to prove the concept. The real code will be much more elaborate and much more elegant than this one. Okay, so the important parameters here are these two. So the base URL is the URL where my application will be running. So our test this basically becomes our test server, the URL of our test server. So let's see what that URL is going. Let's log into our AWS dashboard, and this is our test server, and the URL of our test server is this. Let's make sure that our web server is still up and running. Okay, so Tomcat is up, and what was the name of our application? Let's go check that out. So it is my dev pipeline. So going back to the browser / my dev pipeline. Okay, so this was the previous version, and we are not seeing the new version yet because we haven't committed our code to Git, right? So our website is up, our test server is up. So now it is time for us to commit our code, right? So let's go commit our JSP page first. Team commit. Okay, change made. Okay, so it got pushed. This should lead to the pipeline processing. So let's go see if our pipeline has started. Login. So build war is running. Let's see the console. It is a success. Build and push is running now, or will run in a second. Let's wait for it to finish. It is running. Let's look at the console. Okay, our build image job also successfully ran, and then the integration phase job also successfully ran. Obviously, our new test code is not there, so there was nothing to run or fail. Therefore, it was a success. So our new website should be up now. Okay, so there you go. So we have our first name, last name. Let's change the name of the title over here. Let's go back to our IDE, open our JSP page, and change the title to DevOps registration form. Okay, let's commit it. Got committed, and I'll let it run, and behind the scenes I'll let it run. Well, so let's go back to our test class. So our test class is integration test.java. So as I was saying, this URL is very important. And this URL is where my application is running. So what I have to do is I have to go back to our website and take the URL from here. And obviously in the real code, you will parameterize it, you will store it in a property file, and you will not hard code in the code, right? So Again, for demonstration purpose, I'm just doing it over here. So this is my base URL, which is my the URL of where my application is deployed, and this is the node URL is the URL of my Selenium grid, right? So my Selenium grid is deployed on. If you go back to our AWS grid, our Selenium grid is here. So I have to take the IP address of Selenium grid, and we can even test it over here. We can do a 4444, sorry, 4 4s, and here is our grid that was deployed. So we deployed one Chrome and one Firefox, right? So our grid is available at this particular location. So I'm just going to take this IP address, go back to my IDE, and paste, or rather change the IP address here. Everything else remains the same. My desired capabilities is that I want to run this my test case on Chrome, and I want to set the platform to Linux because I'm running it on CentOS. Okay. And then here is a test. The test is I want to check the title of my page. So if you go back to our web page, the title of my page is DevOps registration form, right? So I'm testing, if I go back to my IDE, I'm testing if the title contains DevOps registration.form, and um, yep, so this is just a system.println statement, and this contains whether or not this contains the text DevOps registration form. And if it contains, then I'm going to consider my test case as successfully run, and if not, it's going to fail, right? It's a simple test case. So I'm going to commit this code now. First test case. Okay, let's do that. Let's try that one more time. Okay, the code got pushed. Now it's worth watching what is happening behind the scenes. So let's go back to our Jenkins dashboard. Our build war is running. Let's check the console. It is a success. Build and push. Let's check the console when it starts running. Okay, it is running. Let's check the console. So our build and push image job successfully ran. And let's see what happened to our integration testing phase. This is why we are here. This is what we are really interested in. So let's check the console output of this. Everything so far looks good. And then here is where it starts running the test. So it is, you may note here that it is running the executing Maven with the clean test. And I passed the integration test ng.xml as a parameter for my as a Suite XML file parameter. And then it is using the system.get property test suite. It is integration test ng.xml, right? Ignore this line over here. I'll remove that. Integration test ng.xml. And now it is trying to execute. It is trying to execute my test case or test case class, and it is trying to get the title. So it says the get title is returning in DevOps registration form, and the statement whether or not the title contains DevOps registration form is true, and therefore the test is considered as successfully run. So test run 1, failure 0, error 0, script 0, and therefore the build is a success, right? So we are now able to test our code appropriately. Let's write a failure case. So let's make a change to our JSP and change the title to say DevOps 123. sorry, title, right? So let's change our title to DevOps 123. Let's commit this code. This time it should fail and my build should come to a halt. Okay, let's wait for all the steps to run. Let's wait for our integration phase to run. So in momentarily, my integration phase will start. Okay, my build is now triggered. Let's check our console output. It's running the tests. Yep, so it failed because it found the title as DevOps 123, whereas it was expecting DevOps registration form instead of DevOps 123. So it failed, and therefore the build is deemed as a failure, and therefore nothing else will happen. Okay, so let's go back and correct that so that it is successful. So DevOps 123, let's commit that. Team commit. And I'll let it finish. Okay, let's make sure that it committed. Okay, I'll let the build run. Now what you have to do is, now that our testing is successful, we want to deploy our code to production, right? Let's do that in the next video, where we will take our image from Docker Hub and then deploy it on the node that is designated as a production server. So thank you for watching this video and hope to see you in the next video to finish this DevOps journey.